Hello, Green Chatters. Welcome to another episode here on the Green Living Chat podcast. My name is David Owusi-Mensah. I'm your host here on the podcast. Today, we continue our journey on Nature in Focus as we take you straight to Ghana, talking about the role of the private sector in waste management with the one and only Cordie Aziz-Nash with Environment360. Cordie started Environment360 in 2014 to support the creation of circular economies with an economic and environmental impact. During the past 8 years, she has become an expert in supporting informal sector plastic waste collectors, also known as waste pickers. She was very instrumental in creating the Ghana Recycling Initiative by Private Enterprise and one of the founders of Plastic Recyclers and Aggregators Association of Ghana, where she served as a president until June 2021. She is very passionate about working with all stakeholders along the value chain to create an inclusive waste management that creates jobs for the youth and women. And her amazing recent initiative, the Circular Innovation Hub, where she seeks to move women waste pickers from collectors to innovators using an open source modular recycling technology. And in today's conversation, where we dive more into the work she's doing and the impact of her company in Ghana's waste management, we dive into her story, getting to know a little bit more about her and her transition to Ghana and how she turned her passion from communication, youth empowerment, and business into waste management. We talked about the role of women in waste management value chain, where we have gone wrong and what we can do better in moving forward. Now we dive into the problems and challenges we are facing with waste management in Ghana and what Environment360 is doing to contribute significantly to improve this sector. This and more in today's conversation, and I just can't wait to share this conversation with you. But before we do that, Cordie was recently featured in a Bloomberg article on the topic West Africa is drowning in plastic. Who is responsible? This article is very, very significant and it opened doors to several conversations. Find this article in the show notes, and this conversation on today's podcast will definitely be an interesting follow-up on what the article pointed out in the waste management sector. Now, who else is ready to dive into this conversation? So grab your coffee and see you on the other side. This is the Green Living Chat podcast. Here, we define sustainability, educate, and discuss feasible solutions to achieve a regenerative ecosystem. In a world where sustainability has become a cliche and misused in practice, we bring you inspiring stories from the industry, research and development, and all stakeholders in between. And together, we can promote the sustainability agenda across the globe. This podcast is proudly produced and sponsored by our team at economies Solutions in Ghana. We come your way with new episodes this and every Sunday at 6 p.m. GMT. So dear Green Chatters, let's get started. Hi, Cordie. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Green Living Chat podcast. Exciting that you're here. I've been chasing to speak to you, and I'm really thrilled to have you today. How's your day going? And welcome.
Yes, it's going well. And I also definitely want to thank you for your patience because this is long overdue.
Oh, goodness.
I think we started touching bases last year, but as nature would have it, I was having a baby, so it was a little bit hectic for me. So happy to be here. To join you to discuss everything green in Ghana and what we're doing at Environment360.
Thank you so much for making time, actually. And really, congratulations on your baby. It's such a precious gift, and I'm sure you're super excited. Your life has changed since last year. Yeah, it's exciting. I really can't wait to dive into your story because I read an article that you wrote, I think, in 2012. About thinking of trading your life in America from the tough term of Africa. And it got me thinking that, so you've been through a very interesting transition. I'm a little bit very interested in your background. How was your childhood growing up? I'm sure, in America. And
Yeah.
how was it for you? What are some of the things that you remember from your childhood experience that you can sort of connect with what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So I grew up mainly in a small town called Peoria, Illinois. I then later moved to Memphis when I was 16. It's interesting because my father's actually from Sierra Leone, but we have family in Ghana.
Wow.
So this is sort of the Ghana connection. But as you know, Sierra Leone experienced war. So most of my family left Sierra Leone during the wartime. So some people came to the US, some people went to Ghana, some people went to the Gambia. So we're sort of spread out in those major areas. One thing, I think my father is also an entrepreneur. In fact, I come from a line of entrepreneurs. They say sometimes it's in the blood, you inherit things from your ancestors. My father's family are mainly entrepreneurs. So my grandmother was a seamstress. I had an aunt that had a large shipping company that used to ship tobacco along the coast of West Africa. So we've been doing this for generations. Early on, I think one thing my father really instilled in us was work ethic. He actually owned a Church's Chicken growing up. So from the age of 10, we would actually spend our summers working for my father. And then that's how we would earn our money for the school year. And we would put it in our bank account. And then this would be what we did our personal activities with. So I think hard work was really instilled from my father. I think also the principle of work smarter and not harder. So don't necessarily take the hardest path, but really sit down to plan and look at what is the smartest path to getting to where you want. And I think the greatest thing my father actually really instilled upon me is that America is not your home. My father has always been very passionate about the fact that though his children were born in America, we were not really Americans. And I think this is something that really sat with me throughout my childhood and sort of
Yeah.
followed me and ignited me in a lot of my pursuits and interests as I grew older. Before I moved to Ghana, I actually worked for Congress, where I started the Congressional African Staff Association with a few other congressional staff that were descendants of Africans or first generation, as we often call ourselves, also Africans. So I think these key principles really sort of influenced me. So when I actually got the opportunity at 30, when the House transitioned from Democrat to Republican in 2011, I decided to give it a go. And it's actually really interesting how I ended up in Ghana because, as mentioned, my father's from Sierra Leone. So I was just going to move to Sierra Leone. That was the first thing I was thinking of. But I have become really good friends with the Ghanaian Chancery in DC. And he says, "So, Cordie, what are you going to do?" And I said, I think I'm going to move to Sierra Leone. And he said, have you ever checked out Ghana? And I was like, no, I have some family there, but I've never been there. He's like, I think you should check out Ghana. So his father actually owned a hotel here. So they put me up for 3 weeks. I came, it was actually supposed to be a week trip. Yeah, I ended up saying 3 weeks. I went back to the US, packed up my belongings, sold everything off, and then I moved back to Ghana 90 days later. And I've been here ever since, showed up with 3 suitcases. And it just so happened to work out well for me.
I just knew you had such a beautiful story, really. I can listen to you all day about this story. And when I read this article, I was wondering, I mean, before this conversation, I was always trying to find the Ghanaian thing in your name, but I just couldn't find it. So now getting to know the story, it's just amazing. And I ask the story most of the time because we have a lot of young people listening to the podcast, and we always want to let them know that the people that they are listening to have been through a certain transition. They didn't just get up to start, saving the world and doing this. So it's always interesting to share your background with the people to sort of understand where you came from and what you're doing right now, so that they can also respect and really acknowledge the process, because it's very, very important. But now we've gotten to know how you got here in Ghana. But how was this transition? How did you then end up into Environment 360? Because, probably just, trying to save the world or sustainability and other things, because you had a totally different background.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that you asked that. It was really just, I guess, a stroke of luck being in the right place at the right time. It's so interesting. I'm a Christian. I think God has really sort of directed my path in his own way. Even years before moving to Ghana, typically, whenever I do a big move, I get a tattoo. And I remember when I was moving from Mississippi to DC, I actually got Nyame Dua tattooed on my hip. And it was so interesting because from getting that tattoo, like years later, I remember sitting in a dentist office at one point in time, and I was reading this article on how waste management was a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I was obviously born at the wrong time. Like, I totally would have done waste. And I think what I didn't realize is I was born at the right time, but maybe in the wrong country. So when I came to Ghana, when I came to Ghana, I was blessed to have saved enough money to not really necessarily have to work. So I call it, I had like a 2 to 3 year like hiatus, like where I was just enjoying Ghana. And then of course money started running out. So we have to start looking at serious options. So one thing I think I learned is that through all of my jobs and experiences that I really wasn't meant to work for someone.
Yeah.
Even when I came, I had a brief stint at USAID. And after the third week, I realized, nope, this isn't for me. So I knew I wasn't going to work for someone. So my first degree is communications. So I started doing some public relations. And through that, I met a gentleman that actually was building from waste products. So I picked up and I started promoting what he was doing. And he was the most interesting guy because he's the first one that I guess sort of introduced me to the value chain for recyclables in Ghana. And we were doing tours. He has a property that he's actually built from waste here in Accra. So we were doing tours for school age children. And every time the parents would always ask, how can I recycle? So it got me thinking like, hey, these people want to recycle. Like, I mean, I think I know the value chain. I need to confirm it, but I think I know it. So why not try to create a recycling program? And through that was actually birthed Evolve. And even Evolve was quite interesting because my first big break in Evolve, so I had created the concept, but of course I have no money to execute, like most young people. So it just so happened, Environment360, we have a signature event called Float Your Boat, where kids build boats from plastic bottles and race them. Yeah. So I'd actually reached out to the Ghana Yacht Association. They have like a boating association. And it just so happened the president was actually the MD of one of the largest water companies in Ghana.
Wow.
So he responds back like immediately. He's like, hey, I'm interested in hearing your ideas, what you're doing. So we sit down, we have a conversation. He's like, all right, this is what we want to do. What do you want to do? So I basically pitched them Evolve. I was like, this is what I'm thinking of. This is what I want to do. He said he thought about it. He was like, it sounds good. Like literally at the end of the meeting, there was no hierarchy. It was nothing. He was like, it sounds good. So like he starts directing people like next steps. So we developed the concept of the Evolve bag. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the markets. I'm going to sell these bags. And I remember when I first started, like I told everyone, and people are like, this is so stupid. People are like, no one's going to spend 20 Ghana cedis to purchase a segregation bag. And they're like, even if they give the 20 Ghana cedis, nobody's going to bring the plastic bag. Well, it goes to show there's always, when you're pushed to do something, it works out. We actually collected around 600 kg of plastic within the first 6 months. Nice. The MD was completely sold on the project and then started scaling. And mind you, at this point, they actually had given us no money. So it was literally just like some in-kind donations to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So I was at his office one day and he called me in for a meeting. And he's like, you know what, Cordie? He was like, you've done such a great job with no money. It makes me think that if we give you some money, you're going to go a lot further.
There you
And
go.
this was actually the first large donation to Environment360. So they gave us some cash, they gave us a truck. And I mean, he literally put us in the right place. You know, I don't have a waste management background. I often tell people if you don't believe in God, I'm like a firm case on that. I mean, 100% he sort of exists. Like, you don't have to be an expert in what you do. You don't even have to know what you're doing, but he'll put the right people in your path and give you the right ideas. And I really think that that was the sort of impetus for a lot of things that happened with Environment360 that has really brought us to the place where we are today, because we've actually been in operation now for 8 years, which is pretty strong considering, I mean, Ghana, this climate, this environment. I mean, so we're really proud of that accomplishment.
Wow, it's such an exciting story and very, very impactful. I'm sure. I mean, anyone listening, you should definitely dive into the show notes. We're going to put details of Environment 360. If you haven't heard of them, then I'm wondering really where you've been anyway. But you definitely should dive into the show notes to sort of get to know a little bit about your work, because it's very, very promising and very impactful. But before we dive into the next question, I mean, throughout all this, there is a trend in what you say, and you're very consistent with everything that you do, and you're sort of very, very passionate, of course, and you try not to let, a lot of things that could, show up as obstacles to prevent you from doing whatever you want to do. But I would like to ask you, what really brings you fulfillment?
To be honest, I really love what I do. Once again, I'm a firm believer. I think your experiences as a human are sort of, um, they definitely help you build up to, like you said, this thing that you're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
I talked a lot about my father being the inspiration. It's because my father is actually the one with a very high educational level and business acumen. My mother's family actually comes from Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the United States. My mother actually didn't get her college degree until she was 50. My grandmother had no college degree. My aunt is illiterate. My grandmother actually cleaned houses her entire life. And I really believe in the power of one generation. So when I look at where my grandmother was cleaning houses, being domestic help, to where her grandchildren are, my mother once again didn't have a college degree, but all of her children have multiple degrees, have done extremely well in their careers. And I think for me, because I've seen how providing opportunity and being in the right place at the right time can really change the trajectory of not just your life, but your family life,
Yeah.
right? So, because I mainly work with women waste pickers, yes, I definitely work with women waste pickers. I look at moving them up the value chain, but I'm not necessarily looking just at them, right? I'm looking like, what is going to be the future of their grandchildren? How is this going to impact their life when they start doing better? How is this going to inspire? I remember right before I moved to Ghana, I went to visit my grandmother. At this point, she was dying of lung cancer. We were just sort of waiting
Oh,
for her to sort of phase out. She had decided to be at home. And I remember I went to go visit her. My mother's family is from a very, very small place called Sardis, Mississippi. So if you're not from Mississippi, you have no clue where Sardis is. But we're from a very small town where everyone is related. It's from Sardis. And I was in Sardis visiting my grandma. And I remember she looked over at me, and mind you, I'm named after my grandma as well. So she's always
oh,
been Big Cordie and I'm Little Cordie. And I remember she looked over at me and she was like, I'm so proud of you because you do things that I didn't even think like were
yeah.
possible when I was a little girl. And, I think that that has continued to really motivate me. It's not necessarily about the work I'm doing today, but it's how I'm potentially changing the trajectory of the next generation of someone's legacy or someone's family tree.
Wow, I love that. Really. I think that your grandma should be very, very excited to even see the things that you're doing right now. And just how much impact you're making. And you made mention about women, because I realized that you were mentioning a lot of women in your family, and you've been very, very, very loud on advocating for women in this particular space. I'd like to just ask you briefly that how does it look in Ghana right now? I mean, women generally in the waste industry, and what can we probably do to improve that?
Yeah, I think globally women have a tendency not to work in the waste sector. There's a stat that says I think women are 2% of the global workforce. In Ghana, there's just a few of us that are actually owners of waste management companies. And you'll see that sometimes, even though the woman is the face, she's actually not the owner, right? So it's
Yes.
owned by her uncle or her husband, but she really like is just the face. So she's just there. She knows something, but it's not something that she's overly into, right?
Yeah.
Um, Even when you look at women in the value chain, World Economic Forum did a study where the women make up almost 70% of the plastics value chain,
Mhm.
90% still remain at the bottom in collecting and sorting. And this is really interesting because these are the hardest jobs, right? So the hardest job isn't negotiating with the middleman or doing
Yes.
the flaking. It's actually the collection and the sorting. And it's been interesting to me just to really see why women aren't really moving forward. And I think a lot of times is that one, this is a very male dominated industry.
Yep.
I'm very sure that if I probably didn't have a lot more confidence in myself, I definitely would have fallen off the map by now.
Very
You're
true.
definitely, I mean, if I tell people, I was telling one of my staffers today is that one thing that doesn't move me are threats, right? Because at this point, I've been threatened by so many waste management companies. Like, people, they're going to sue me. I've been served papers by lawyers. Like,
Really?
I mean, people have tried to dog my organization. Like, so I tell them one thing I'm never worried about
Wow.
are like threats and rumors, right? Because in the end, the dust settles and I mean, everything comes out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think one, women have a tendency, it's not just even the work is difficult, but even finding your niche as a woman in this particular field is
Yeah.
difficult, particularly when you come from a society, you're open operating in a place like Ghana, which is still very patriarchal. I was just laughing because if you look at most of the pictures of Environment 360 and the work we do, I'm typically the only woman in most pictures, right? And it's just such an interesting dynamic when you look at it that way. So I feel like women also aren't as comfortable having a hard ask. So I think for men, even when they're not doing everything right, they're very confident
Yeah.
telling somebody, I need $50,000, I need $100,000. And I think most women have a tendency to focus on in-kind donations and support. And I mean, this is even something I've had to work on through the years, right? I'm very sure that if I was a man early starting on and this large water company only wanted to offer in-kind support and put their name on everything, I probably would have said no, right?
That's right.
But just starting, I was like, no, I need it. And like, even I remember the only reason I don't want to mention them is because I remember in the end, when I did finally get the kahunas to sort of stand up to them, it had been like the program had been going on for 3 years. They were pushing it as like a landmark program. They literally were giving less than 5% of the operational costs of the program, but they were writing on it. And
Yes.
I remember like telling them, hey, if you guys aren't going to put up the money, then we need to end this partnership. Um, and like, I think they thought like I was joking, and I wrote them an official letter and ended it. And it was so
Wow.
interesting because they asked about the name, and I told them, you guys can have the name. Like, I mean, I'll just move on. And then, of course, not thinking ahead, I mean, God has a plan for everything once again. So they actually then started funding a competitor of mine. And because they were funding the competitor, they actually dropped the name and picked up a new name of a recycling program. And I mean, I just picked Evolve back up and like ran with it because it was like Tina Turner at that minute. Like, I don't need anything else but my name.
Wow. I'm loving
So
this.
So then I was able to keep the name Evolve. And then it just so happened later that year, Mesty recognized Evolve as the first successful plastic recycling program. So it was just like a win that they had dropped the name. I had picked it back up. So it was just like one of those things. But once again, it comes back to not being able to ask for, have a hard ask, right? So I'm sure once again, I probably wouldn't have ended up in that situation if I had just been able from the very beginning, clearly the partnership and the funds that were needed to actually run it, right? I also think that sometimes women get too caught up in charitable work.
Yeah.
It's something I consistently have to remind my staff about is that we can't do good work without money. So we're not spending money if there's not a return on investment. Yes, technically we are an NGO. Also, I pride myself on us having self-sustaining features of our NGO, which is probably why we've outlasted so many, is that there's certain activities that we're able to fund ourselves, like our circular innovation hub. So because I always stress that whatever money we spend, there needs to be a return on investment. I think this is also something that most women don't think about. They get so caught up in doing the good that they fail to realize that they need the money to do the good as well. And I think really one of the one of the last things about being a woman that's really challenging is that you don't see a whole lot of women that are acting in this field. So, I mean, it's not as if you can go to a woman and say, hey, what did you do? How did you learn? And I think that that mentorship aspect sometimes can be 100% critical when entering into a field like this that's such a rapidly changing field, right?
Yeah. Have you thought of writing a book?
So many times, but I feel like I don't have that much to say.
You probably just have to get someone, writing it, and you just have to say, just keep talking. Honestly,
Just an
because
audiobook.
probably because there is a lot. I mean, whilst you're talking, my mind is just on, like, I mean, this is real passion, right? Because a lot of people in this space, especially as you were talking about the limitations for women and some of the things that are happening. I mean, it's a very male dominated industry, and not just this industry. I think it applies to other industries, of course. And I've listened to a lot of places where you have given speech or joined a discussion or anything like that, and I always see you trying to find a way to advocate for women and sort of tell people or just be that example. I think you definitely do have a lot to say, not just about that, but also even what we just discussed right now about your childhood experience and all that. I know there's definitely a lot to
Well,
write.
thank you, David.
But really, thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Hi there, just a quick one. If you find our conversations worth listening, why don't you share them with your friends and connections? Please help us reach more and new listeners by leaving a review, commenting, or rating us on any platform where you get your podcast. We can't wait to hear your thoughts and ideas, so share them with us via a social media platform or email. Find more details in the show notes. Now let's get back into today's conversation. I'd like us to dive a little bit more into what Environment360 is doing and all the wings that are attached to it. But before that, I'm sure that there's a huge problem in Ghana right now. And I think waste management it's really, really a huge problem. And there are so many things that are entangled to this, like this annual floods that we see in the country from year to year. And there are so many diseases that are attached to this. But then there is one thing that I would like to ask you about, some of the reasons why we cannot really manage our waste very well. One of them is definitely the collection. We don't have, proper segregation systems and all that. But then there is another issue that has become sort of part of the culture. And I know you're loud about this as well, about human beings, our behavior of littering. How has this contributed to, the waste pollution that we have in Ghana? And why should we really consider that as a very important thing to tackle?
So, one, I think that responsible handling of waste or sustainable handling of waste is critical, particularly when you look at Ghana's infrastructure. We only have two engineered landfills in the country, which essentially means that waste being disposed of in other places is definitely leaching not only into the ground but water supply as well. So these are critical things that we need to look at. Two, we have to realize that we have a high prevalence of environmental diseases, which are 100% preventable, such as typhoid, cholera, malaria. All of these are directly related to how you are keeping your environment and the cleanliness of your environment. And then three, I think it's also critical because nobody wants to live in a dirty place, right? With Ghana really pushing tourism and becoming the gateway of West Africa again and having this year of return and then beyond the return, no one wants to
Yeah.
come to a country that looks like a dustbin. It kills tourism. Particularly when you're paying high costs and then you don't feel like you're getting what's in return, right? Because we also know that Ghana is one of the most expensive countries to visit. So imagine spending $3,000 to get here and go to the beach, and you realize you can't even get in the water because there's plastic bags everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's not someplace I want to take my money and spend. I think that it's been really interesting to always have this talk about how it's embedded in the culture and people don't want to do better. But I actually think it's the opposite. I think that waste management companies have failed to show the capacity to do better. I think a large part of it is because we have a monopoly in waste management and it's a highly inefficient monopoly. So I think that it would be different if it was super efficient when no one would mind, but it's a highly inefficient monopoly where money is often lost in the system. It's not subsidized by government or taxpayer money. So essentially, you're expecting waste collectors to also collect their own fees, which is almost unheard of because they're not bill collectors, right? They're waste service providers. And I think some of these inherent glitches make it really difficult for them to pick up. So I don't think is that citizens litter everywhere and they're not willing to pick up. I think that we don't have a business model that's attractive for people to patron, and we don't have proper service providers that can provide consistent and reliable service.
Wow, you raise really, really important points in this kind of solutions or in this kind of points that you raise. And I think that, of course, the government hasn't done too much about, trying to solve that part of it, making the waste management industry sort of more attractive for even the youth to sort of indulge in. I think maybe, of course, the private sector is doing well at this moment because there are quite a number of recycling industries or recycling teams coming together. And for sure, Environment360, we cannot definitely talk about this recycling and waste management in Ghana without mentioning your name. And you have done a lot, considering even your recent circular innovation hub, Evolve, and all that. We've talked about the problems, right? Could you tell us what you are doing with Environment360?
Yeah. So Environment360, we actually started off in school programs, as mentioned. Over the years, we basically have been known as the creator of recycling programs. So not only corporate community schemes, but community schemes as well. In fact, due to our success, we were actually tapped in 2017 by the Danone Ecosystem Fund Foundation to be the implementing partner for Picket, which is the first waste picker-led sorting center in Ghana. We're actually entering into phase 2 of Picket now. Adding some more value addition to the waste pickers in Tema Newtown to help increase the amount of plastic collected from that area. We've also run several business or test cases for the federal German state of North Rhine-Westphalia through GIZ to better understand what are the incentive models that work really well for the informal sector. How can you incorporate private sector, be it either in kind or cash, in the development of collection points, as well as engagement of local municipal assemblies to better understand what they think their role should be This is actually running these test models the past 3 years in both Accra and Kumasi is actually what led us to create the Circular Innovation Hub. What we realized from the data is that we had women whose numbers were undoubtedly increasing over the 3 years. They had definitely gotten better at teamwork, at identification of plastic, at sorting by colors, taking off the lids. But what we realized is that we weren't really seeing a huge jump in their income, particularly as their team members grow. And we had to basically come to the conclusion is that basically you can't raise incomes just off of collection. Once again, we could have continued on the path and I mean, just fundraise to do collection points and um, capacity building because, these are hot spaces for NGOs right now. But instead, what we decided to do is how can we really maximize that impact and move people up the value chain? And what we developed was the Circular Innovation Hub, which essentially seeks to give community members technical and practical skills that they can use to actually develop second life products from various waste streams found in their communities. Because we've been dealing in plastic, we actually, our first project, we bought in a modular recycling technology from Europe, in which we trained women to use the lid of the PET to actually make a variety of products. Our first product we're launching in a few weeks. It's called the Ghana Waste Beads, but it's a traditional bead that is actually made from 100% recycled plastic. So plastic picked from the streets of Accra, shredded, and then the women waste pickers that we've trained to operate the machine, then turn it into a second life product, and then they're making jewelry. This has caused a 200% increase. Even when you look at the women we've hired, these women on average were making 300 Ghana cedis per month. Now they're making 800 Ghana cedis per month in addition to the money that they're getting for their collection. So it's really sort of changed the trajectory of some of the women that we're working with, which is what we're seeking to do. Here at the Circular Innovation Hub, also, we recently just launched our Green Generation Ambassadors Program, which is a training program for JHSH students in Dodoa, so between 12 and 16, where we teach them how to take part in the circular economy and how they can actually position themselves, get jobs, internships, opportunities, just to really help circularity in rural communities as well. We think that the Circular Innovation Hub is quite important because typically when we talk about circular economy, it's a very Eurocentric or westernized view, right? So it's let's collect the plastic, let's make it into some high-end product that's super expensive that consumers are willing to pay because we put the word sustainable or recyclable on it. And I think what we have to realize is that circular economy in Africa may be completely different than what it is in the West. And now Environment 360 really has that special focus in on how can we promote the African version or vision of circular economy versus that westernized vision of circular economy.
I really, really love the work that you're doing, and I think it's making a really, really big impact in the environment and in the society. I really hope that the necessary and the right stakeholders will come and support this vision, especially this new projects that you're doing with the Circular Innovation Hub and the new products that is coming out. Definitely needs to be purchased on all platforms. We could use that way to sort of support you in one way or the other. But then with all these things that you're saying about your activities, you make it sound so good. Are there any challenges that you are facing, and probably how could people or necessary stakeholders sort of support to make this a little bit of less of a burden for you?
So I think that that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of challenges, particularly when you're doing something new, right? One thing I say is that I think we have such a great vision for Environment 360, but sometimes getting that expertise in is something else. Right now, with the Circular Innovation Hub, we're at a point where we have a high need for technical and chemical expertise. really helping us understand how to processing different package materials, different packaging into a usable form, developing these open source modular recycling technologies that can be easily scaled and used throughout West Africa, and then created and sold at a very affordable price, so that we're not focused on creating 5 recyclers, but we're focused on creating 5,000 recyclers. I think something else that we always, struggle with is, human talent. And I think that human capital, of course, particularly when you're in a rapid growth phase, is always a really critical component. I think a lot of people want to be associated with a winning team, but not a lot of people want to be put in the work that it takes to win. And I think that that's a really critical component. Fortunately, we've gotten some money for some capacity building, but we're always looking for mentors, other peers that we can link our staff up with so that they can also learn at a very rapid rate as well. Because it's not always just about the hard skills that you need. Sometimes it's about soft skills, right? Sometimes it's about being able to have a different perspective on your thoughts and training yourself to think a different way than how you've been trained to think. I think some of the other challenges and things we need at this point are really, we're just looking at partnerships. How can we isolate people that either one want to source the products we're currently creating from the hub, and they can add their own value to them. So for instance, the Ghana waste beads, it's not our intention to create our own jewelry. We're more interested in selling the beads out in bulk and letting people make those or use those beads in the way that they have their own creative talent. So if it's jewelry, if it's clothing, if it's accessories, eyeglass holders, whatever it is, if you're doing something that uses a traditional bead, are you willing to replace that with a Ghana waist bead and then buy in bulk? It's the same. We also make buttons. It's the same with designers. Are you willing to purchase buttons that are a little bit more expensive, but are made from local recycled plastic that help keep a car clean and motivate women waste pickers? We're also looking for companies that want to work with us to develop a product for them. So sort of like a maker shop. So saying, hey, I have this design. We want to work with the hub to develop this from recycled plastic, and then going through the prototyping process until we can actually have a final product. So this is what we're actually seeking for at this particular time.
Nice. So if you're listening to this and you think that you fall in any of these areas where you could sort of give some support in terms of partnerships, training, skills, mentorship, definitely dive into the show notes. All links to Cordie and her group is going to be in the show notes. So just dive into that and get in touch, and let's support this amazing mission so that we can help to make Accra and Ghana, a better place to live. Cody, all the things that you're mentioning with so far in the last few minutes has to do with sort of collecting waste and sort of recycling it, and finding a new purpose for it. And I really like it that you're sort of blocking all the ends of this chain so that sort of we could get the system, the materials back into the system as resources. But do you think that on a larger scale, the recycling space is being sort of a sustainable solution? And if you see any loopholes in there, how can we make the industry more effective?
David, I think that's a magnificent question that we really don't think about enough. I don't think our recycling space in Ghana is sustainable. As mentioned, we ran several test cases with the German federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, and what we realized in each one is that the moment you have to start carrying transportation, renting facilities, salaries, there's not enough money for you to actually be able to cover it. I think this is why most of our collectors are in a consistent fundraising mode, right? So everybody's looking for partners, everybody's going after the grants from the various development agencies in order to really be able to solidify or to continue getting running capital for their organization. But sometimes I've recently started having to talk with some funders, is I think funders need to take a step back. When you look at the amount of money that's been invested within the collection space, it's been probably near $1 million. if this business was sustainable, would we need to invest that much in different collectors over a 4 or 5 year period and they're still fundraising? I think what we need to realize is that we're not focusing enough on the other ends of the value chain. We're not looking at redesign. We're not looking at repurposing. We're not looking at innovation. One of the huge things that particularly COVID showed us is that we have a bottleneck with so few buyers. Essentially, what happens is that the moment there's a breakdown with a buyer, you have a whole breakdown with the collection value chain. So, because most of our buyers are not adding value to what they are actually collecting, it also minimizes what they can pay. I think that funders, donors, and individuals that are in a position to create projects need to actually take a step back. They need to start focusing more on technology, on innovation, and really how can maybe we look at redesign.
Wow, I really think that I would like you to hit that thing again, because I think what you just mentioned is very, very important. And it's one loophole that we find in this space. I see a lot of people trying to get into the recycling, or generally people just have the idea that, okay, let's just collect them and then break them into pieces and probably sell them elsewhere or something like that. But then there hasn't been a lot of efforts into, turning them back into something valuable that could get back into the system, because that sort of helps, the recycling companies to sort of also make money. Because I realize that recycling could be a good solution, but then it takes a lot of money in terms of energy, transportation, and even the people that you're employing, of course, to collect the waste for you. So I think definitely should be something that we should speak more about, and see how we can make that system more effective. Now I'm going to put you in a very uncomfortable situation that we know that, I mean, collectively, the waste management system in Ghana, you mentioned earlier that it's not just about the behavioral approach or issues or something cultural, but then the system has not, made it attractive for people to even dive into it. There are no, facilities or government policies to even make working in the space more comfortable. So if you were put in charge just for a minute, right, what are some of the changes you're going to make in this space?
So one, I'm definitely going to break any monopoly that there is.
Definitely.
100%. I think that we have a lot of really brilliant individuals that just aren't getting a chance because they're not in the monopoly ring. So I think 100% we're going to learn to break the monopoly. I think the second thing that I would really do is really give the informal sector a little bit more attention and see how they could actually really work together and really pull. I think also there has to be the development of local technologies. So once again, I feel the collection levels are great, but there's no need to expand collection if you don't have an end product. One of the things that I'm really concerned with the green revolution in Africa is that, as you know, Africa has missed out on the industrial revolution, and essentially we just export raw materials. If we're not careful, it's going to be the same thing with the green revolution, right? Essentially, we'll just be exporting the raw material, which is in this case the plastic. It can actually even be solar cells. So if we're not careful, Africa is actually not going to have the opportunity to fully harness the green economy. With the fastest growing population and the highest youth population, it would really be a tragedy if we allowed this opportunity to go. So I would probably also look at more investment programs and really getting youth prepared to actually work at higher level jobs of the green economy, versus just in collection and waste management.
Wow, really important points over there. If there is anyone, sort of now wanting to dive into the space, or probably wants to join Environment 360, or wants to know more about the things that you are talking about, do we have any communities in Ghana where someone like that could start from, or do we have like platforms where such conversations are going, or you probably have maybe plans of starting a community like this?
Yeah, so Dodowa is actually going to be our model community, which is why we've launched the Green Generation Ambassadors. We think it's important for people to also realize that Accra is not Ghana. We have more rural areas and urbanized areas. So while we're rushing to create solutions only for urbanized areas, we don't want to leave out rural areas, particularly if that opportunity can create jobs that stop an influx of individuals moving into urban areas. So for us personally, Dodowa is definitely going to be our model community. If you're in and around Dodowa and want to support, we would absolutely love to have you on board. We have a fabulous hub manager, Padiki Awote. Padiki is more than easy to reach. You can always email her at info at environment360gh.org. I think for platforms, I think there's so many green platforms. Environment 360 hasn't felt the need to create one. I mean, once again, you have your own personal chat with Live Green. There's the Eco-Conscious Citizens of Ghana. GAYO has a youth group. Ghana Youth Environmental Movement has a youth group. So what we try to do is work in tandem with them, but we're more focused in on the Dodowa community and how to empower those citizens and raise youth that are focused on the green economy, creating green opportunities for themselves locally.
Wow. Thank you so much, Cordie, for even making time for this conversation. I've really learned a lot from some of the things that you mentioned today, and I think that is going to be very worth listening to our community of listeners here. But before we let you go, I'd like to ask you last two questions about what does sustainability mean to you, and what are you generally doing to contribute to that meaning?
So sustainability means to me that people essentially are able to not only own the activities, but finance the activities that they're doing. Like it's worthwhile doing independently,
Yeah.
right? One of the things I say is we spend so much talking about formalizing the informal sector, but I tell people if people were making money in it, it would naturally formalize, right? We need to focus in on how can people actually make money from it. For me, to create sustainability, it 100% has to be practical. We need to be giving the appropriate technical skills, and we need to make sure that it's a viable, decent income, and not something just so we can check the box of funders that yes, we created a job, but it's a low-paying job, or yes, we're collecting more, but the people aren't being impacted, or the community isn't seeing a reduction in the visibility of plastic waste. So this is for me at the heart of sustainability, is ensuring that the people are doing better, not only in their environment, but economically as well.
Wow, I love exactly what you said. And honestly, you made mention about the informal sector, and it made me think about something that I wanted to ask earlier, but I think I skipped it. Do you think we have done enough with education when it comes to this space?
Absolutely not. I still think most people have a negative perception of informal sector. I still think most informal sector workers are a little bit embarrassed by the work that they do. I think that there definitely needs to be more attempts and strides for education and visibility of informal sector workers. This is why one of the key things, something else we're doing at the Circular Innovation Hub, is creating circular experiences for communities and corporations. So we actually have a gallery that people can rent out with different activities. And in all of our activities, you actually get to engage with these women and hear their story and understand more about them and why they're so important to the waste value chain. So I think that we need to create a platform where that exchange can actually take place so that we can start start putting a face with these informal sector workers, particularly community waste pickers, which are mainly women, which could be your aunt, your cousin, your mother, so either grandmother. So I think that we have to start personalizing it more and move away from the fact that the informal sector are these very hard guys that are working on the landfill, and are dirty all the time and are using the money to get high or buy alcohol.
Wow. This is a more reason why you should definitely consider writing a book, because every minute of this conversation has really, really been insightful. And you shared really important points that I think could be like, new ideas for people to dive into this space. And want to say that thank you so much for making time. I really know that you're very busy, and for making time for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it, and I enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for the invite, and sorry it took us so long, but I've enjoyed my time with you today.
This was amazing. Hey there. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of this episode. Now there is a call to action. So why don't you engage with our community of green charters on our social media platforms? Find more details and links in the show notes. Get involved with the podcast by emailing us at glcpodcast@economiedsolutions.com or DM via our social media platforms. We cannot do the same things expecting different results. The urgency of climate change demands actions now and not in 2050. So, dear Green Chatters, see you on the next episode, and remember, live green.